At least amongst people who volunteered to have it done.
Yeah. Well, that's an interesting point, isn't it? Because one of the findings that we've been discussing is that the majority of anaesthetists won't even think of volunteering for such a study. Why do you think that is?
Yes, I think that's interesting, because although we know now that that you don't need pain as well as paralysis in order for the experience to be distressing. Paralysis alone in accidental awareness can lead to long-term PTSD symptoms. And yet, most anaesthetists won't volunteer to take part in a volunteer study. They don't even want to try it to see what it's like. Even when it's voluntary, even when they've got an isolated forearm that they can communicate with, even though they know what's going on, they still don't want to try it for 5 minutes. And I think that says a lot about how most of us perceive that loss of control that doesn't quite marry up with the other belief that perhaps it's not that bad as long as there's no pain. To me, that doesn't make sense.
No. And it corresponds with my experience after I'd done my experiment of anaesthetists getting to hear about it in my locality and coming to shake my hand to say, what an amazing thing to do. And then you sort of ask them, well, why is it so amazing? And they say to you, well, I agree it's not that it's unsafe, it's probably safer than having a general anaesthetic, but it's just the sheer psychological challenge of having absolutely no control that they find remarkable. Do you think that's perhaps the issue for those who won't volunteer?
Yes, I think it probably is. And the flip side of that is often people say to me, well, how on earth did you get this study approved through ethics? And what I normally say to people is, well, what's the issue? It's safe, it's much safer than your 1 in 200,000 risk of death from a routine anaesthetic. We're informed, and we've got an isolated forearm, so if you do find it distressing, you can bail out at any time. Where's the ethical issue? And at which point people just generally kind of say, well, yes, but I don't know, it all just sounds a bit weird. It's unusual, but I suspect the loss of control is the issue. And in my experience, when we were first setting the study up, about a third of anaesthetists would say, there is no way I'm going to get involved in that. Another third were trying to sign up even before we got it through ethics. And in the middle was a group of people who were very interested about what it would be like, fascinated, but almost in a morbid way, because they weren't going to try it. They wanted to know what it was like, but they said, I just don't know how I deal with it. And I think that's...
So what was the experience like for you?
Well, we did it first with succinylcholine, then on a second occasion with rocuronium. And I have to say that succinylcholine is a roller coaster ride. The fasciculations are very unpleasant. And then you're just left with this dense, heavy feeling, this dense paralysis throughout your body. And because I had succinylcholine first up, it was my first experience of the paralysis, and I remember thinking, I'm glad this is only going to last for 5 or 6 minutes, because I know I can handle this for that long. With rocuronium, the experience was a little bit different in the sense that you didn't have the fasciculations, there wasn't that dense feeling of heaviness, and in fact in some ways I found it quite unremarkable. Apart from the fact that someone was ventilating me by face mask, my body just felt like it was normal until I tried to move. And when I tried to move, there was just this sudden, instantaneous dysphoric reaction. It was just a horrible sensation that quite took me by surprise. And I immediately stopped trying to move my leg and just sort of lay there, at the same time thinking, well, wait a minute, you've set this trial up to see what it's like. You can't just lie here now and not see what it's like. But every time I tried to move my legs or an arm, it just felt very unpleasant. Was that your...
Well, when I tried to move my arm, I was so reminded of an occasion when I volunteered to be hypnotised. And during the hypnosis process, my hypnotist said to me, you won't be able to move your arm, it's completely paralysed. And I had this idea in my head, well, maybe I probably could move my arm if I really wanted to and I really tried, but I can't be bothered. But when I took atracurium, I found myself thinking, well, if I really put sufficient cognitive effort into making my arm move, maybe it might just move, maybe a millimetre. And of course I did that, really put incredible cognitive effort into moving my arm, and nothing happened. But interestingly, I didn't get a sense of dysphoria. It didn't really affect my mental state, it was just an odd experience that I couldn't actually move my arm, and maybe conclude that actually the pharmacology is far more powerful than psychology on that occasion, so you just have to lump it. But I also had this, thinking about the whole experience of being given atracurium, I had this strange sense of control, paradoxical sense of control, because I'd written the script for everybody. There were about 8 people in the operating room when this happened, and everyone had some instructions from me about what to do in certain circumstances. So I knew that they were all operating according to my instructions, even though on the face of it I was the one who was completely helpless. But I also had these occasional catastrophic ideas like, what happens if there's a power cut? Or what happens if this lot decide to clear off and leave me to it? The other thing that I noticed was saliva gathering at the back of my throat, and at one point I did think, if this carries on, I could effectively drown. However, I was also aware that Ian Russell would have a vacuum tube if he noticed that
It's funny that all these different thoughts can race through your head in the few seconds.
Yeah, and also bearing in mind that with my experience I had a lot of cognitive tasks to do and responses to make using my isolated forearm, because I had a pen strapped to my finger, so I was giving out quite a lot of information about my mental state, and also I was hearing words that I was supposed to be memorizing, because part of the experiment was to find out if there were any cognitive and memory effects of a muscle relaxant like atracurium.